Thanks for hanging out with me. Today I'm going to be doing something a little different. Over the past several weeks, I've been reviewing Twisted Metal Season 2 episode by episode, breaking down the twists, characters, and the little Easter eggs for longtime fans. But tonight I'm going to step back and take a bigger picture view of the whole season. I want to talk about this season as a whole, what worked, what didn't, and what it means as an adaptation of one of the weirdest, most violent, and most unforgettable video game series of all time. And I'm going to do it in the style of a full length review and discussion. So pour yourself a drink, settle in, and let's dig into Twisted Metal Season 2. When the first season of Twisted Metal dropped, it was a gamble. It was a live action adaptation of a video game that was essentially cars with rocket launchers blowing each other to pieces. It could have gone wrong in about 100 different ways. Instead, what we got was a show that leaned into the absurdity, found an emotional core in Roadkill's story. It's where the show finally took off the gloves. It was the season where the tournament, which is the central conceit of the games, was finally realized. And that decision changed everything for this show. Think about it. Season 1 was basically a post apocalyptic road trip comedy with occasional bursts of carnage. But Season 2 is a blood soaked epic where nearly every episode is a battleground. Suddenly, we're not just watching two outcasts, we're watching a whole cast of mythological figures collide. It was when Twisted Metal finally started to feel like Twisted Metal. So let's start with Roadkill and Quiet. Their dynamic was the beating heart of Season 1, and Season 2 kept that alive, but with higher stakes. Roadkill's big question now wasn't, who am I? It was, what do I do with who I am? He was still goofy, still lovable, but he was carrying more weight. He wants to build something, connection, a life that isn't just constant running. Quiet, on the other hand, is still haunted. She's got unfinished business with the people who run the world from inside the walls, a deeply heroic yearning for justice that sits like an open wound. Together, the two of them are messy. They fight, they hurt each other, they push each other away, but they also always come back to each other. And that to me was the show's most honest note. Bettering yourself isn't clean, it's stumbling forward one step at a time. And Anthony Mackie and Stephanie Beatriz sold it completely. Mackie's charm pulls you in, and Beatriz has this razor sharp presence that makes you believe every ounce of her pain. And then, of course, there's Sweet Tooth. You can't talk about Twisted Metal without him. Samoa Joe's physicality plus Will Arnett's voice is one of the strangest and most effective casting choices in recent memory. Sweet Tooth is funny, laugh out loud funny, but always in a way that keeps you slightly on edge. In season 1, he was a sideshow, and in season 2, he becomes a presence throughout the entire story. He's still cracking jokes, he's still getting up to his murderous hijinks, but every laugh comes with a twinge of fear almost. The clown at the heart of Twisted Metal is hilarious right up till he kills you. And that balance, comedy and menace in equal measure, is what makes him work as more than just a mascot for the show. He's a symbol of the show's whole tonal balancing act. Now, before I get into the rest of the contestants, it's time to talk about the big bad. We finally meet him in the flesh this season. Calypso. Finally, season 2 gives us Calypso in full. After we waited throughout all of season 1 hoping to see him. On the surface, he still just appears to be a charismatic deal maker at the beginning, a fairly grounded depiction of a man who thrives on pulling the strings of desperate people. But as the season progresses, every so often we get a glimpse of that straight from the game's demonic overlord, a fire-eyed devil in a suit. He manipulates, he twists, and then when the champion's wish finally plays out at the end of the tournament, with its inevitable irony, you could pretty much hear the echoes of those old PlayStation cutscenes. And for me, that was the biggest relief this season, because it told me that these writers do get what made the game so compelling. It wasn't just the cars and the blood, but it was the cruel joke at the heart of every driver's dream when you got their ending. Now, I'm going to switch gears for a second and talk about the rest of the contestants, and I'm going to start with the winner. And that would be Hammerhead, Mike and Stu. Honestly, those two probably shouldn't even have worked. They're a couple of fairly unremarkable guys, and they're usually bickering whenever they are with each other, but that's exactly why they're essential. Stu is usually comic relief, yes, but he's also a reminder that this world isn't just made up of brooding loners and tragic anti heroes and larger than life personalities. There's also regular people who just somehow survive against all odds and who deserve friendship. In the games, Hammerhead was this big truck with attitude, but here, they drive a less remarkable vehicle, but it was really the personalities behind the wheel that gave it life. Stu's commentary on the madness around him and somehow making it out alive, it was too bad Mike wasn't as lucky. And then you've got Mr. Grimm. He's probably one of the most iconic drivers in the franchise. A skeletal biker with a death wish. Considering he had no armor whatsoever in those games, it took a fairly skilled player to actually be able to play him. The show reimagines him with a gritty yet darkly comical edge. It wasn't just a cool design, it was a man defined by the kind of psychological wounds we don't really get to learn too much about. His scenes are brutally fun, some of the most visceral action this season, but they're not just violence for the sake of it, they underline his role. He's a foil to Sweet Tooth, another character completely consumed by madness, with a similar, just a little touch of the supernatural. And when the two of them finally face off at the end of the season, it was so satisfying. And then there's Shadow, who we get to know as Raven. There she is. She brings something different. Stylistically, she's gothic, moody, all in black. Her car isn't quite the hearse we remember from the games, a vehicle that was dripping with death symbolism, but it does get the point across. The show grounds her not in magic, like in the game, but in performance. She wears her darkness like armor. She's the kind of character who walks into a room and dares you to underestimate her. And even for all of her villainous qualities that we got to know her for throughout the first season when she was played by Nev Campbell, it was hard not to empathize with her tragic reasons for participating in Twisted Metal. And the bitter end to her story that perfectly reflected the themes of this franchise. Just how far is too far for the thing you desire above all else? In a story as chaotic as this, she was important. And part of that was really thanks to Patty Guggenheim's performance. She added a different flavor. Twisted Metal has always thrived on archetypes colliding: the clown, the soldier, the zealot, the goth, and Shadow's presence kept that tradition alive. And then, of course, there's Axel. How do you even adapt Axel, the man literally strapped between two giant wheels? Somehow they did it. The combination of practical effects and digital work makes it believable, even if it's still ridiculous. And honestly, that ridiculousness is part of the point. Axel is a tragic figure. His whole identity is being bound, being trapped, being forced into pain. And that comes through here in Michael James Shaw's performance. Axel is perhaps the most literal symbol of what this world does to people, change them to their suffering. And in a season that was in part about redemption, Axel was the reminder that those chains can be broken. Now, maybe, just maybe, we'll get to see him again next season. That post-credit stinger was quite interesting. But for now, I can definitely say that the resolution his redemptive arc in the season finale was absolutely beautiful. Now, probably the boldest move of the season: Darkseid. Introduced as Dollface, then later revealed to be Roadkill's sister Krista, Darkseid was a character who started as a freedom fighter and evolved in unexpected ways, put it lightly. Because at the end of the season came the big reveal. Darkseid's reanimated corpse is now Minion. That's right, the original final boss of Twisted Metal, Minion. Fans of the games have been waiting for Minion to show up, and tying that reveal to Darkseid's arc was genius. It wasn't just fan service, it was storytelling. It directly tied the most physical threat from the games directly to our protagonist, Roadkill. And it was payoff that says, yes, this is your franchise, but we're not afraid to twist it into something new. For me, this was the season's most haunting transformation. Now, hopefully, we'll get to see her drive Minion's iconic armored combat vehicle from the games next season. Now, before I wrap up the character by character talk, there were a few other nods to fans that are worth mentioning. Brimstone showed up again, now a whole family of cult worshipping drivers bringing their own absurd brand of zealotry and menace. Spectre, driven by Chucky Floop, gets a short lived arc, and even Junkyard Dog makes a brief appearance that will mean nothing to newcomers, but should be familiar to people who played the games. These touches tell me the writers care about the mythology. They know the bench is deep, and they're willing to dig into it. And that goes to show where the season really comes together: the world building. We finally get the tournament we've been waiting for over a season. The Chaos has rules now, and those rules are horrifying. And if you've played Twisted Metal 2, you know where things could go next season: a globe spanning competition that takes the carnage everywhere. That's the biggest promise Season 2 leaves us with: the sense that the madness is only just beginning. So, what did I think of Season 2 overall? I think it was a triumph. Not perfect, but ambitious, bold, and deeply faithful to the twisted spirit of the games. It embraced the spectacle, but it never lost sight of the people inside the cars. Season 1 made me hopeful, but Season 2 made me a believer. And if Season 3 does take us down the road of adapting Twisted Metal 2's worldwide tournament, then this show has a real chance to cement itself as one of the best video game adaptations we've ever seen. It was messy, brutal, hilarious, and strangely beautifully human. And that's my review of Twisted Metal Season 2. Thanks for sticking with me through this long dive. I'm going to open things up to you guys now. So, what do y'all think? Which arcs worked best for you? Which moments hit hardest? And are you ready for the chaos of Season 3? Let's talk. Let's see. Do I have anyone? Waiting. That would be a no. That is okay. I actually have some questions that I have lined up for myself to answer. So, I was asked, what worked better this season, the action or the character drama? And I actually think Twisted Metal pulled this off beautifully in equal measure. Character drama always propelled the action, and the action always to a degree that it was satisfying. Was the pacing strong, or did some episodes drag? I'm asked. Pacing, I thought, was mostly perfect. It starts off slowly building its way up to the tournament through the first few episodes, but by the time what was it? I think it was episode 5 kicks off. Episode 5 is really where the season becomes the tournament. That is when Twisted Metal becomes Twisted Metal. There were a couple later on, um, episodes 8 and 9, that slowed things down a little, but overall, this was a great season in terms of pacing. Even when episodes 8 and 9 dragged a little, I never lost interest. Now I'm asked, which performances stood out to you most? And I would have to point out Patty Guggenheim as Shadow, Michael James Shaw as Axel, and of course, Will Arnett's voice work as Sweet Tooth are all phenomenal. Anthony Mackie always holds it together as Roadkill, and he's still an interesting protagonist to follow. Let's see, I'm asked, how does this compare to other video game adaptations like The Last of Us, Fallout, or Halo? Well, I certainly wouldn't say Twisted Metal is, better than The Last of Us or anything like that, but I actually did do a top 5 ranking of the best video game TV adaptations, and I put Twisted Metal as a solid number 3. That put it after The Last of Us and Fallout, before anything else. Let's see, I'm asked, what themes lingered with you after the credits rolled? The one thing I thought Twisted Metal pulled off beautifully in terms of theme was actually bringing back the game's theme of be careful what you wish for. This season it felt more like how far will you go for what you wish for? How far is too far? What is it worth to you? Do you really want it? And to me, that was always what the games, or really any be careful what you wish for story, is really always asking. Let's see, I'm asked, what drew you to the show? The games, the cast, or the sheer weirdness of it? Honestly, I was always a fan of the games growing up. They were a big thing in the late 90s, early 2000s, and as soon as I heard there was a Twisted Metal TV show happening, I was pretty much guaranteed to be watching it no matter what. The cast got me even more excited for it, seeing that it was more an A-list cast, and the sheer weirdness didn't hurt either. So, all of the above, but first and foremost, I would say being a fan of the games. Let's see, I'm asked, do you think this season's finale should have leaned darker or did it strike the right balance? Honestly, even when Twisted Metal gets dark with the reveal of what Calypso is capable of, or Roadkill's reanimated sister's corpse as Minion, it still managed to make me feel like it didn't lose sight of being the darkly comedic show it is. And that to me is what makes the show work. Let's see, I'm asked, how do you see Roadkill compared to other anti-heroes on TV right now? Does he stand apart? Honestly, if anything makes Roadkill stand apart, it's the fact that he's fairly laid back. He's fairly I'd say comfortable speaking his mind. He's not gritty or brooding, but you can tell he has that pain on the inside. So it makes him interesting but likable. Let's see. Was Quiet's arc this season satisfying, or do you want to see her darker edge return? Quiet is a big part of why Roadkill's story works. Honestly, she was the one who really fulfilled the role of a hero this season. From the moment she makes her wish, it is clear that she's the one who wants to bring the walls down. She's the one who wants to make the world a better place. Honestly, Roadkill's still at a point where he just wants to get away from all of this. But we can see that's what Stu wanted, and it didn't really work out great for him, nor did it end up being what he wanted in the long run. Even though it's relatable to want to get away from everything, we do have to give back in a way. Roadkill finds that the world needs him, and even though this isn't like a superhero story or anything like that, that is ultimately what he is becoming. He is a hero in that sense. And that is in large part due to Quiet. They make each other better people. And Stephanie Beatrice's performance as Quiet is perfect. Every episode she's in. Let's see. Someone asked, is Sweet Tooth the true mascot of the show? Does he risk overshadowing the other characters? I think a lot of people will love Sweet Tooth just because he's so ridiculous. And I think that is what keeps a lot of people coming back. But ultimately, that's not what keeps me coming back week to week. Roadkill's story and the deeper stories that a lot of these characters have is really what makes the show shine. But Sweet Tooth is a good draw for anyone who likes a little bit of silly. Let's see. Does the tonal whiplash work for you, or does it take you out of the story? Those random bits of dark comedy actually make the show work great. And honestly, it's really appropriate for what the games were. I mean, yeah, you got people blowing each other up in their cars and death and destruction everywhere you look, but it's always played for laughs, oddly enough. Let's see. Oh, which game characters do you want to see introduced next season? Well, we did already get that glimpse of Charlie Kane at the end, or that reference to him, I should say. So I already know that we're gonna get Yellow Jacket, and what I really hope that means is that we eventually get Yellow Jacket becoming Darktooth, the final boss from the second game. I also hope that we get to see Minion, or Darkseid, or whatever you want to call her, actually drive the armored combat vehicle she's known for. Because in this season, we only got to see her on foot and in that armor. So yeah, I'd say Minion with the vehicle and Darktooth, Yellow Jacket and Darktooth. Those are the big ones for me. Let's see. I'm asked, did the adaptation strike the right tone between the game's cruelty and the show's humanity? And I would say yes. The adaptation got the tone perfect. There was really no other way to do Twisted Metal that would have worked without having a bit of comedy to it. It's not Death Race with Jason Statham, where that movie was so serious that you could kind of look at it and say like, wow, this is a Twisted Metal where a movie. But honestly, Twisted Metal always had a little inspiration from the classic '70s Death Race 2000, and that movie was a comedy essentially. And that's what this show is. It's got a bit of satire to it, and that's what makes it work. All right, let's see. Oh, I'm asked, who was your favorite driver this season and why? I would say that Roadkill is becoming more and more my favorite because he's becoming more of a hero. I really want to see him get a wish and for him to make a wish that actually undoes Calypso. I want to see him beat him. I'm very curious how many seasons this show can go before that happens. And that really leads right into this next question I got asked, which is, do I think Calypso is being set up as the ultimate villain or more like a game master? And I mean, if we're going by the games, even, it's always been a bit of both. He is clearly a villain, and he does operate as a game master, and even very few characters actually win Twisted Metal and get a wish that works out for them. And I would hope that, considering we get a multiple season long arc from this show, that whoever ultimately wins Twisted Metal takes down Twisted Metal in Calypso. Let's see, I'm asked, was the show right to lean into found family, or should it be even darker? Honestly, the relationship between Roadkill, Quiet, and Mayhem kind of forming a little found family was really sweet. It was beautiful. Especially because he finds his birth sister only to lose her again. So knowing that at the end of all this, Roadkill has a family around him is actually important because it gives him something to fight for. And then, if I can make one be careful what you wish for ending yourself, what would it be? I gotta say, I don't have anywhere near the sense of creative irony that these writers have, and that's a big testament to both the creators of the games and to Michael Jonathan Smith, the showrunner of Twisted Metal. He's created a great show that really understands what those games are about, and if it weren't for him, none of this would work. And let's see, do I have any live viewers? Because that is it for questions. All right. Well, it looks like that's it for questions. So I'm just gonna say, you know, I think the most interesting thing I saw was at the very end of the season with all the teases of the future. We have Calypso making his references to the globe-spanning aspects of Twisted Metal 2, the game. We get Sweet Tooth being dragged in front of Charlie Kane. We get to see blueprints of the Human Axle Project, which is interesting. So I think it's safe to say that no matter what season 3 becomes, it's going to be interesting to watch. That final image of John and Quiet and Mayhem and Stu just staring down the abyss of war with nothing but each other. It's gonna work. Oh, what is also interesting to bring up, Michael Jonathan Smith did give an interview with the Direct very recently that's worth discussing. Uh, the Direct asked him, uh, Calypso's backstory briefly being teased in that first shot of the finale. Is that something we'll see more of in the future? And then what was that process of figuring out just how much we're going to be shown now? And to that, Michael Jonathan Smith said, the definite idea for season three is to dive deeper. We talked about, okay, we want to lean into the supernatural this season. And then when we did that, it was really freeing to be like, okay, well, what do we want to see? And what is one image that would be emblematic of the idea? And he said that one image was Calypso climbing out of the well, which to me is interesting. I'm looking forward to learning more about Calypso because we never really did in the games. There are hints that he, stole Minion's powers when Minion was a demon in the games, but they're doing something different with him, so there's all sorts of possibilities. And then Michael Jonathan Smith went on to say that the climbing out of the well idea is the most fun. And one of the ideas he had was that the well was being protected in some sort of warehouse. Then he decided on it being like a pocket dimension that Calypso could control and move around. Smith goes on to say, I think the idea of him climbing out of a well was imagery that was just so powerful that they actually went back in when they started shooting the prom scene. And they were like, hey, let's say Roanoke. Because originally Calypso was going to say Roman in the Roman days. Then Smith was like, no, let's change it to Roanoke instead. And he said it was just fun to keep referencing that imagery and keep having everything tying into that. So ultimately, Smith didn't want to show too much. He wanted to tease it because it was important to say there was 100% more to this guy. Because throughout the season, they just kind of sprinkle little details. All right, then the direct asked Michael Jonathan Smith, "What can you tease about the introduction of Pope Charlie Kane and how that'll switch things up and really change Sweet Tooth's world?" And Smith said, "I'm really excited about the possibility of that because I feel like we've visited the West Coast, but we've never really gone to the East Coast." Or the Eastern sovereignty, as Smith likes to call it. And that idea of world building is really exciting to him, especially the idea of Pope Charlie Kane, who has taken it over, and the exciting opportunity to world build that. Charlie Kane has taken over that entire section. How much of it is owned by that guy? What does that mean? And he loves the fact that he's a pope and thinks that's going to be really fun. There's so much stuff about parents, about family in season two, like Smith said. And so he says that's going to carry over into season three with Sweet Tooth meeting his dad. And look, if Stu and Sweet Tooth reunite, is Stu going to meet his grandpa? So I think there's going to be a lot of fun to be had with Sweet Tooth reuniting with his father. Let's see what else we got. So yeah, those interview details were interesting, and suffice to say, I think season three has a lot of interesting stuff in store for us. All right. And with that, it looks like I don't really have any live viewers, which is all right. This was very much a test run for live streaming. So I guess with that, I'll thank people who check out this video later on, anyone who checked it out along the way. And I guess I'll just leave it off with this. What did I think of season two overall? It was a triumph. It wasn't perfect, but it was faithful to the games. It embraced the spectacle, and it handled the characters really well. Season two is really the one that made me believe in this show. And if season three gives us the worldwide tournament in the second game, then I know it's going to be a genuinely great video game show.